Hello and welcome once again to Talking Pictures Podcast. I'm your host David and join with me as always my co-host Brian. Brian, how are you today?
Dehydrated.
Well, don't be take a sip of water now before we start the podcast. Don't be dehydrated for the next hour or so. We have a special episode. It's the second part now of our Empire 2-week period. We had Ghostbusters Frozen Empire last week, and now what is it? Kong x Godzilla, or Godzilla x Kong, the new Empire.
I think it should be called Kong. I think it should be called God. Wait, what? Yeah, it is called. I think it should be called Gong. I think it should be called Kong x Godzilla, or at least in the sense, I think whatever the in between letter they use, whether it would be a V or an X or a Y or a Z, I think it should be called Kong Godzilla. Because ending on Godzilla, it leaves you on the high, whereas Kong ends in the heavy tone of it. I just think Kong Godzilla is a nice. I think it's better sounding. What do you think?
I think for the exact opposite reason that it should be Godzilla x Kong, because I feel like Kong is like a deep like Godzilla x Kong, like it's a exclamation point without putting the exclamation point there.
Nah, Kong x Godzilla.
Listen, come here. Look, these boys were fighting. There's no need for us to fight now here on this. But before we talk about the actual film, do you want to do a trailer of the week for us?
Yeah, David, don't slap me in front of an audience at the Oscars. I got
my mechanical arm here ready to go for you.
Speaking of, yes, Bad Boys 4 finally has its trailer released. I think maybe we'll see if people are ready to watch Will Smith again, if they're bothered by his physical assault to Chris Rock. I was a Bad Boys fan as a child watching those first two movies. And then I guess, oh, look at this. In 2020, was it 2021 or 2? Or I can't remember. Or was it 2020? Yeah, I can't remember. In the last 3 years, let's say, we got a Bad Boys 3. And one of the better legacy sequels, I would say. And it's the same directors of the number 3 coming back to direct number 4. Keeping it in-house with some actors they've got in the third one, so more like Ghostbusters has its first two movies, and then the next two movies, as I said in our last week's episode, duology. Bad Boys has its number 1 and 2 duology, directed by Michael Bay, and now the guys who had their Batgirl movie removed from them have their two Bad Boys movies. And you can just end it on that. And like I say, keep it in-house. Having the actor who played the police captain in it. Having some of the side characters come back. Reggie. If you've seen that scene on YouTube, even Reggie, Martin Lawrence ripping the shit out of Reggie because he's dating his daughter, and then in comes Will Smith. I don't know. Have you watched the Bad Boys franchise?
I've not seen any of the films, but I've seen that scene where he comes to the door to take her on a date.
Yes.
And they completely just verbally undress him right then and there.
Oh, yeah.
And so to see that he's still around in the fourth one, I did see the trailer. I watched about half of it, and I just kind of, I don't want to say I lost interest in it, but I had other things to do, so I just stopped watching it. And I was like, I'm sure
I had other things to do.
I did have other things to do, other things to watch,
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, okay, we'll just see how this one turns out. I'm not a huge Bad Boys fanatic fan. Maybe I was a little bit back in the day because I thought it was cool, but I got old, David. I got old and I got wise in my years of life. So enough of that, Bad Boys. We'll see it come out. But actually, I do want to ask you this before we proceed on to a monkey fighting a lizard. And what are you going to see first? Bad Boys 4 or The Crow?
Probably The Crow, just based on the fact that I haven't seen any of the other Bad Boys. Like, I might watch them in the run up to this, but it's more so I probably would be quicker to see The Crow than I would to see Bad Boys.
Fair enough. That's all I want. All right, David. That's me.
Just wanted to confirm that. Yeah, so we saw then this week, we saw the next entry, what is this, the 5th entry into the Monsterverse, which is...
I don't know.
It's a lot of... well, no, there's not a lot, actually, because I rewatched them all in the lead up to this one, just to have a kind of a fresh, like, having seen them recently and not casting my mind back ages to remember, oh yeah, was this character in it? What did they say? You know, this... What plot elements did we drop and what did we carry forward? So, there's only 5 films, 2 of them being these team-up movies with Godzilla versus Kong back there in 2021 must have been.
Yeah.
And then here we are now with... I heard about this now. Apparently the X, you don't pronounce the X. Apparently the name is actually just Godzilla Kong, the New Empire. The X is not... you don't pronounce it. So why is it there? I don't know. It's like a squared almost.
If they wanted us to not pronounce the thing in between their names, they should have just put that dash in between it. You know, the dash.
The cross, yeah.
It's not a cross. It's a...
No, but like a...
Yeah, a slanted yogi thing.
Yeah.
That yoke.
So, where did you come into this film in terms of, like, what were your expectations and... because you've seen all of the Monsterverse movies before. Multiple times, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I went into this movie major fan of Godzilla, Team Godzilla, if you will. And I left being a Team Kong and a fan of Kong more so. Because not only is... It's nothing to do with the lack of screen time compared to Kong that Godzilla has. Godzilla's just a dick.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. What is he doing? What an absolute asshole.
Well, that's the thing, I suppose, is that, like, it's fair to say that this movie, it should just be called Kong, and also Godzilla comes in at the end. Because, like, the entire time, 90% of the film we're spending with Kong. So I don't blame you for being on his side or, you know, liking him better as a character, because we spend most of the time with him. Like, you can't help but the guy that we've been with the entire time.
It's not even to do with the screen time. I became a fan now. Like, take Godzilla X. Sorry, Jesus Christ. I'm going to fumble my names up here, David. The last one where they're supposed to be fighting each other. The civil war of the Monsterverse, if you will. Mm-hmm. I was rooting for Godzilla. And I left that movie. Delighted that Godzilla won. Mm-hmm. This movie, we spend... time, not just more time with Kong, but Kong is a character. He's a thinking, conscious, humanoid character, and he interacts with more life forms, humans, so on and so forth, whereas Godzilla is just doing whatever the hell he wants for the good of the environment. And he ain't just protesting with picket signs. He's completely demolishing cities, killing masses of millions of people just by taking one foot in front of the other. And we don't even see people get killed in these action sequences. For example, he just comes across a building and just or goes through a bridge, and we see the building collapse or the cars just go 90 into the sky, and we have to assume those are people in there, but we just don't see them. So it's easier to digest that, oh well, you know, Godzilla, yeah, he's got to do what he's got to do, and if he doesn't do what he's got to do, it's going to be worse. And I'm thinking, yeah, but you know, he doesn't have to be a dick about it.
Yeah, there is that line from Rebecca Hall. I think she's on the phone to like one of the delegates or someone from Rome, and he's like, yeah, well, you know, he should be thankful that Godzilla came along and helped, because the whole city would have been destroyed if he hadn't been there. And it's like, well, Godzilla, you know, he tore up pretty much half the city anyway. It's like I do see where that throwaway line to excuse that fact, but there is a line.
There's a line.
Yeah, it's very clearly coming from the character who it's happening to a foreign people in a foreign country. Where if this was happening in like San Francisco again, like the first one, like San Francisco is like held in such high regard in all of the kind of following Monsterverse movies, whether that be King of the Monsters or the Monarch show. But as soon as it's in another country and someone else's problems, like they should be grateful, you know. It's just like double standard for when Godzilla attacks, really.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Look on the bright side. Could be worse. That's just the attitude for it. But I didn't like this movie. I didn't like it compared to the last one. Like the last one was probably my favorite, but this one. Not only did I have an issue with how close he filmed, not just monsters, but also the people as well.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this movie was lending itself the favour of having a reduced cast, somewhat of a shorter run time, therefore accommodating more financial funds for the budget to go towards the visual effects and the CGI, because there would be maybe, I don't know, more sequences of it, and there is more sequences of it, but I don't want to throw CGI around the whole time so easily and so bluntly, because it's not easy to do, but I think the CGI is not great here. I was looking at a lot of Kong sequences and Godzilla sequences and other stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, I guess you just didn't have enough money then, I think. Like, the opening sequence where Kong, and he traps all those dog-looking yolks into the trap, and then he roars at those who are still there and they run away. I thought that shot of Kong looked bad. I thought there was a load of shots of Godzilla that looked pretty bad. Wide shots and close-up shots. And so on and so forth. I thought because we had literally there were what? 4 main characters in this movie now, with Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, Dan Stevens, and the child. And then a few supporting actors. Okay, great. You've cut the cast in half, and it looks to be, compared to the other movies, compared to this one, the cast is just riddled with an ensemble, and you don't have that here. And because it's so small, you'd just be following these set of characters. You wouldn't be having some B storylines going on here, like there was 2 groups in Kong Skull Island, or you had Kyle Chandler's storyline and Vera Farmiga's storyline in King of the Monsters, or how in Godzilla versus Kong you had the main storyline with Alexander Skarsgård, and then the B storyline with Millie Bobby Brown. This one you have the one sole storyline. Yeah, you have some military officials following what Godzilla is doing, but those are like throwaway scenes.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's not a story. It's you're following Rebecca Hall's character and Dan Stevens and stuff as they kind of work through the plot there, and you have Kong, and then every 20 minutes or so it's a shot of Godzilla, and the military go, oh my god, he's powering up, he's getting so powerful, what's he preparing for? And it's literally like just
to sell toys,
just to remind you, hey, Godzilla's in this, don't worry, Godzilla's coming later. You know, he's not, there's no plot to Godzilla other than he's powering up, he's getting so much stronger.
And in fact, there is actually another storyline, and this might be the main storyline. And that's Kong and what he's doing. Because we, as I said before, we spend so much time with Kong. Oh, he's feeling down in the dumps, he's feeling lonely, there's no one else of his species, he's no other family. And then he comes across Mini Kong, and he seems curious and delighted to finally see another member of his species. And it's an ambush. There's loads of great titan apes that are still about, roaming about, ugly as fuck, by the way. But so that's Kong's storyline. You can argue that's the B storyline or the A storyline. I don't know. It's the one everyone wants to see because no one gives a shit about the human characters, and leave that to the Monarch show. The Monarch show does a great job with characters, human characters. Monarch show is great. The movies are for the giant monster action flicks. But you could shorten this movie, cut out a lot of other stuff, and just allocate more money that you had at your disposal to fix the special effects, because it did not look that great. And I thought if this was a cheat for the director to get away with it, he shot a lot of the monsters. I know you don't shoot the monsters with a camera, they're fake, it's digital, but you frame up on the visual effects, so you have less of a job to do it. And he did this with humans as well. Do you know the pilot, the soldier who gets eaten by the fucking tree? You know when they're about to take off and he puts the glasses on and he's piloting the ship and he says strap in, knuckle up, and whatever the hell else he said. I was just distracted by how close that camera was up on his face. It was literally from the top of his sunglasses down to his chin. That shot was so up close to his face. It was as if he wasn't there on the day. Then they had to get away with it. I know that's not the case, but that is an example of what they did to the human side of the cinematography and framing them up. That's not much different to how they shot the Titans and the monsters and anything that's CGI and digital. It's all close-up shots, and it happened in the fight sequences as well. It pretty much, to compare it to Godzilla versus Kong, there's a difference there in how that was conducted and how that was framed and shot. So I've not seen anyone notice that. Maybe I'm just being delusional, but I'm seeing what I'm seeing.
I kind of agree with your sentiment of like, I didn't really enjoy this. Having watched all of the other ones leading up to it, I think that all of the other ones, all the other Monsterverse movies, kind of sit in and around about the same level in terms of like how good it is, whereas this just felt like a very, very steep decline. And I think for me it was two glaring problems. The first being just that for a movie where I want to see a giant ape fight a giant lizard, there was just too much plot. Do you know? Like, we're following the human characters and they are trying to find this kind of beacon in the hollow earth because Rebecca Hall's daughter is having like psychic visions and stuff like that. And I'm like, sorry, what?
No, you see, David,
I don't need psychics.
That's actually quite a common thing in these blockbusters these days. The prodigal child has a connection. They have a feeling. I'm not normal. I don't get along in school. You know, that's a very common thing these days. And sorry, I am being sarcastic. It is. Because when I saw that in the trailer, David, I was like, you're doing the stupid, dumb type of movie, aren't you?
Like, it's fine in terms of if she feels like she has a connection to Kong, and they have that in the first movie, but then when it's this one and, you know, she's being called, like, psychic visions are coming to her head, and they find the, what's her tribe called again?
Iwi, Aoi?
The Iwi or something. And Iwi, they find those, and they've been hidden in the hollow earth for ages, and they go into this cave and they find like a prophecy, and it can only be done by an Iwi girl from Skull Island. And I'm literally like, oh, how convenient, we have one of those. Like, the plot is exactly what it needed to be. And then as well as
I thought how convenient it was to read the translation.
This dead language, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not just that, David. It's just like straight and circular lines, and whoa, you know, this reads right here, blah 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 blah. Because I can't remember what it says, but what it does say is quite an exposition of what is needing to happen. Just in case we as the audience are too stupid to follow, there's a lot of easygoing markings and carvings,
drawings on the walls.
Yeah. Just in case if we were too stupid to follow, you know.
And then
please continue, please.
And then there's the whole like kind of in between the fights, you have Brian Tyree Henry, and he's like, oh my god, look, the gravitational well, and like they're trying to explain that the gravity can be manipulated by these people, and that they're gonna like smash the pyramids into each other. And it's basically just to explain why in a couple of minutes we're going to have a fight and there's going to be a zero G segment. And it felt like it was just like, just go down and say we're close to the core of the earth, so the gravity works different down here. You didn't need to explain everything and trying to get the barriers to touch, or the pyramids to touch, or whatever it was. Like, whatever, they were jumping through hoops to try and explain this, whereas all they needed to say was, we're close to the core of the earth, the gravity works different down here. And that's the level of writing that I needed from a monster movie. I don't need full explanations and prophecies and all this stuff. It's like, I'm not here for that. I'm not here for that element of it. I'm here to see giant monkey fight giant lizard. Very simple. I'm very simple when it comes to these movies. Like, I'm not expecting deep lore and all this stuff. Now that stuff is probably there for some people, but I think the majority of audiences aren't there for that.
Well, David, I agree with you quite well, and the writers were trying too hard to accommodate a story just to get to the good stuff, you know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They should have just embraced the good graces of having an intellectual property that you just need to write decent, basic storytelling, easygoing dialogue. Don't make it stupid and don't overcomplicate it. We are not here to follow the chosen one, touch the sparkly thing because they don't talk to their fellow peers in school and are having visions and they're connected to I don't care. Just monsters fight. That's what we want. That's all we cared for.
And even if they wanted to go with that, like the chosen one and it's too dangerous and stuff like that, like the whole prophecy was leading to her resurrecting Mothra, which is okay, fair enough. You're going to do that. That's fine. But then they get to that point of the movie and there's no consequence for that action, or there's no like, you know, Mothra is going to return, but we need to sacrifice. There's no sacrifice for the reward of Mothra coming back, because the child goes up and like she puts her hand up and there's the glowing, like you said, the glowing stuff, and she touches it and she kind of recoils for a second, but then puts her hand straight back and then Mothra's there. And I'm like, okay, so there was no sacrifice, there was no like conversation beforehand of like, it's too dangerous, we don't know what'll happen, we can't risk it. It was just very much this is what needs to happen, so that's what we're doing. Okay, we did it, and here's Mothra.
Oh yeah, it's quite easy going. No trials and tribulations.
There's no consequences or no sacrifices that need to be made. It's very much a kind of storytelling that's, you know, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Whereas storytelling should be, this happens, and because of that, then this happens. As a consequence of this happens. Because of this happens. Like every decision that you're making or every plot point that you want to hit, they have to, you know, come as a consequence of everything else. It has to make sense to flow from one thing to the next, as opposed to just, it's like a 4-year-old telling you a story. What did you do today? I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And it's not interesting to do that. So it's the little girl, they find the tribe, and then they find out that she is the key. And then she goes up and she has to unlock Mothra, and then she unlocks Mothra, and then Mothra can fight. And it's like, that's not interesting storytelling at all. And it just felt like you're saying there, they had to write a plot for the humans.
But they just try too hard. Just went too hard on it. Like, we don't give a shit about this story.
Sometimes the plot for the humans can be, we're following King Kong, we're following Godzilla, and it's nearly just like to explain to each other what's happening, as opposed to like an actual plot or actual development. Like you're saying there, if you want to do that, leave that to Monarch. It's fine. you know, there is an outlet for that where we see in-depth characters and relationships and stuff like that. Whereas in this movie, it should very much be just they are following King Kong and they're making sure that there is a human presence amongst Kong. Do you know?
Well, for the most part, I think what they were doing with Kong in terms of him coming across Mini Kong, fighting off other apes, and then telling Mini Kong to lead him to the lair, and then sort of bonding with Mini Kong, and then being led to the villain of the movie and a tribe of the great ape. And I thought that was interesting enough to, because he met him, as a consequence he wanted to know more about, and he you know, it was a good moving storyline with Kong, unlike the humans. I liked that. I liked mostly everything they were doing with Kong. In fact, Kong's probably the best character in this movie. I don't know, do you want to do your flashbacks before we get into the next part?
Yeah. Well, yeah. One of my flashbacks kind of highlights one of the other problems that I have, but I will talk about that in depth kind of after the flashbacks. Laura, play that jingle for us. Thank you, Laura. So we've got 3 flashbacks for us there, and I think what I'll do is I'll just put the one I want to discuss later as the last one, so we can discuss it a little bit. But anyway, flashback number 1. Godzilla has 8 minutes of screen time in this film, which is actually the least amount in the Monsterverse movies. Compare this, he has 3 minutes less than he did in Godzilla vs. Kong, which stands at actually 11 minutes, and then 2 minutes less than he did in King of the Monsters, which was 10 minutes, and then he was the same in Godzilla 2014, it was 10 minutes.
It's funny now to think, because Godzilla 2014 is famous for not having enough of Godzilla, but because it's quite limited in the number of monsters and humans, it's easy to not notice the lack of screen time or limited screen time Godzilla has in the other movies, because they're riddled with characters. It's got longer screen time, it's got other screen time for focus for other monsters, and I can see how it's easily what am I trying to say? It's easy to forget that, oh yeah, Godzilla actually not in a whole lot of this movie, and that's for all of them.
See, when he's in Godzilla 2014, it's very much he is held back and he is more of a scarier presence. Like, he is really the monster of the movie. So anytime he's shown kind of in darkness, and so
he's not a superhero.
A lot of the time, yeah, he's obscured a little bit. So even though he might not be on screen, he's still within the scene. Do you know? Like, we might be with Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character and Godzilla is fighting in the background, and we'll cut to a shot of him fighting the other kaiju there. And so you'll get a sense of it that he is still fighting there, and then we'll cut back. So even though he does have less of a screen time, I'd say in those other movies he has more of a presence, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Whereas in this one, it very much felt like all of the scenes were taking place with Kong as opposed to Godzilla, and it would just cut back to show you that he's still there, rather than he's not having a sense, he's not having a part of the scene. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you meant.
Good, I'm glad. Flashback number 2. Mothra convincing Godzilla and Kong to put aside their differences and take on a greater threat as a power trio is much like her role in Ghidorah, the three-headed monster from 1964. What I said to you in the car was, I thought this was very funny that Godzilla and Kong put aside their differences thanks to Mothra, and Superman and Batman put aside their differences in Batman vs Superman all thanks to Martha. So in 2 Warner Brothers films released in the last 10 years or so, we've had a Mothra and a Martha who have stopped the 2 main characters fighting, and I just think that that's quite funny.
Is it funny or is it pathetic?
I don't know. I wouldn't use the word pathetic. I'd say that, you know, if I had a nickel for every time, and it's like I'd have 2 nickels, which is not a lot, but it's odd that it happened twice. You know,
just because they wrote that Mothra does this, why? Why does Mothra stop the fight between the... I'm just trying... And then I'm just even more confused because, the little girl who woke up Mothra is standing at the top of one of the triangles in Egypt, in the pyramids in Egypt, and, just standing in front of all three Titans, and they'll give a big roar for a big wide shot. That was in the trailer. How did that girl get there from Mothra? Fight. How did Mothra get there? Sorry?
You needed to have them fight. You needed to have them fight in some capacity. You needed to have them, like, have a few knocks and then they come and work together. And it wasn't going to be the same as it was in the last one where they have a proper fight and then they have to join together to get Mechagodzilla. This time it was like you two boys, you stop it. You stop fighting each other. You aren't enemies. And then they're fighting the big bad guy.
What did you think of that fight?
There's not much to it. It was kind of strange to have, like, Kong putting up his hands to be like, no, don't fight me. It's like, sometimes...
Giving him human characteristics.
Yeah, sometimes the characteristics are a little bit too human. Like, at the end of the day, he is still an ape. He still is a monkey. So having him put up his hands and, like, waving him off, like, no. And then Godzilla, he is just the monster in the situation. He's just coming to fight because
big
they're two
fucking
alphas.
Ego is what he is. Big ego. He sees Kong there, and you're not supposed to be here. I'm going to go kill you now. And the one thing I liked about that fight is I've grown to be switched from Team Godzilla to Team Kong. That I'm glad Kong, who's trying not to fight, who's trying to avoid the fight, is alright, you want to fight? Gives him a couple of 1-2 punches into the face, and then he drags Godzilla by the tail in the attitude of, I'm going to drag your scaly lizard ego ass back to this hollow earth because I need you to help me, whether we both like it or not. I was sold on that because he was dragging him by the tail. It's like, I need you, I hate you, but we gotta do this.
Yeah, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like, it's reluctant, let's put aside our differences and work together here on this. Like, there's no point in any of these movies going forward that they will be friends. They're very much like reluctant allies almost. Yeah. And then flash fact number 3. So despite him appearing to be younger than Kong was in Kong Skull Island, Zuko, which is baby Kong, is at least 45 feet taller than Kong was in that movie. And this is the point that I'm wanting to get onto next, is that my main other problem with the film is that the sense of scale is just not there whatsoever.
Thrown out the window. So I don't want to make Laura hang on any longer, so let her play the theme tune and we'll get talking about that kind of the scale of this movie. Okay, thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. So she had the good sense to not come see this movie with us. We said, Laura, do you want to come see Godzilla? As you know, and I went, whoa. It's Godzilla and King Kong. Apparently, David, there's no and. You don't pronounce the S. It's actually just called Godzilla Kong, the new empire. Apparently. So, like I say there, right? The biggest problem with this movie is the sense of scale. In that flashback there, baby Kong is 45 feet taller than Kong was in Skull Island. Think about that for a second. What everyone is referring to as baby Kong is taller than King Kong was in his own movie. And not once did I ever feel that, did it ever look like that at all. The whole movie takes place in this hollow earth, which is just these huge vistas, this, under the planet, this giant world where all of these monsters exist. The only problem is that once you put all of those monsters in this giant world, they're no longer giant monsters. They're giant monsters in relation to humans, yes, absolutely. But there's no humans in the scenes. So when Kong is just walking around and he stumbles across the baby Kong and the two others, they just look like apes fighting. It just looks like Planet of the Apes.
And I'm like, it's not a good Planet of the Apes either. The scale throughout the whole movie is gone until there's a scene where they find the little girl again, and he like raises his finger up to like, you know, connect with her or whatever, and you go, finally, a sense of scale. We can see now how big King Kong is next to these humans. But the entire movie, he's just in these giant vistas, or he's standing next to other apes. So even though Baby Kong looks smaller than this Kong, he's supposed to be bigger than our actual Kong was in the other movie, and it just doesn't come across that at all.
I definitely agree with you, but my issue is that this could have been solved by a means of how they could have framed these monsters when humans are not there. And that is to frame them the same way you would if humans were there. Now, I'm not talking about from the eye height of a human looking up, because they aren't going to get much out of that. I'm talking about lowering the camera and framing upwards. Even if whether you're on a medium close-up shot of a monster or a wide shot, getting a sense of the setting that they're in, where there's loads of monsters. All you have to do is, put it this way, David, if you're going to raise the camera up and look down at them, that just defeats the purpose of the scale. And that, they're quite average height looking, aren't they? Because I kept on telling myself, David, when Kong was on his own at the start of the movie and he set the trap and he's standing in that arch, or when Kong is swinging Mini Kong, using him as a weapon, you know, and pillow fighting the other apes, which it was funny. Or even, as you said, them walking amongst the trees. Even Kong walking on the skeleton of that deceased monster, which is used as the bridge. You see, and then you bring in the other monsters as well, and then you bring in Shimo, that big monster who's supposed to be bigger than Godzilla, slightly bigger. You see, they're all roughly the same size to each other, but at max, they're the height of Transformers. And you could have fixed that by framing the camera to at the bottom, looking upwards. Not completely, not as I said, from the very bottom, as if it's from a human's perspective. More like from the chest height of these monsters, looking up at them, not eye level, because of course we as the audience have a problem here. Well, then it's us who needs to have the subconscious of feeling that they are still monsters. So we're not supposed to be looking at these monsters with height level, you know. Like they're
putting a lot of work on the audience to have the scale in their own head. It's like, remember now, these are monsters. It's like, you're not showing me that. Like when they're walking around in this hollow earth, and like you said there, like they're kicking around rocks and stuff like that. But the rocks, because of the way that it's framed and the way that it's shot, the rocks just look like regular rocks that me and you would kick around. But in relation to us, these are boulders that would kill anyone. But there's no scale to them. Like it's I just think a real problem to not have us as a point of reference. Or even still, when they have the human characters, they're not coming across these giant boulders that everyone else is coming across. Like the scale isn't there for them. They're walking through a forest of normal trees, whereas when Kong is walking and he sees a tree that's bigger than him, that tree should be absolutely humongous. If it's bigger than Kong, imagine how big that would be to any of the human characters, but it's not shown. And I think it's a real downfall of the movie. Like when they go up to the real world after they get out of Hollow Earth, the Skar King and Shimo, then I'm like, finally some scale, and I can see him on the beach and looking down on the people, and yes, that's finally scary. Now I have a sense for how big this guy is, but it just takes way too long to get there.
You see, even though that problem is solved when they're all up on the beach on Earth, my next problem, which I mentioned earlier, was you're destroying too many buildings and tossing away the fact that millions of people are being killed. You're just not showing us.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the buildings being destroyed. Like, that's part of it. That's the destruction of it. But it's when you don't see the what that actually means. Like, it's you might as well have just taken every human out, deleted them from and then it's like, okay, yeah, go fight there. Do you know what I mean?
We don't see them just because it's like the fact that Godzilla swimming in one of the rivers and his back, because the back with his spiky yolks destroys the bridge, and the cars on that bridge are just toppling over. There's no detail on them on seeing the destruction. More like how when we're looking back to the scale issue, when we're looking at these monsters, there's no detail in the environment that they're in. Take me and you, David. If we were outside and we were looking at a ground and we see, oh jeez, there's an awful lot of cracks in the road, as a road would have, bumps or potholes or cracks, If we were the height of the Titans, we wouldn't see those details. And I guess that's why we don't see them types of details when we're the height or in the perspective of these monsters. Maybe I just contradicted myself there, but just besides the point. When we're watching these monsters, we still don't get that sense of scale. But I want to throw another wrench into this issue, David. Do you remember in Skull Island when Brie Larson first meets Kong? And he lifts the helicopter off of the moose? Look at Kong there, and look at the height of Brie Larson's character. Kong's not much bigger to how the little girl is to Kong. Yet Kong in Skull Island is supposed to be shorter than Mini Kong in this movie. Yet the height of Brie Larson standing next to Kong is similar to how the little girl is in her height standing next to Kong in Godzilla X Kong. Yet Godzilla is supposed to be so much far more bigger compared to Kong in 2014 Godzilla compared to Kong in Skull Island. You see the way, if you're able to follow me, David, with that, well, I suppose that's a good chunk of how the scaling issue has been dealt with in these Monsterverse movies. There's really much no consistency whatsoever.
No, they go up and down depending on what the scene needs. It's just that
yes.
This was the very first time that it felt like there was no... Not even consistency. Consistency isn't the right word. It is just sense of scale. There was nothing to compare it to. There's no
even
way that I... What?
Godzilla sleeping in the fucking Colosseum in Rome.
the Colosseum, yeah.
So I guess Godzilla is able to fish in that now.
Even though in his first movie he was the size of skyscrapers, but now he can fit into the Colosseum. Whatever the scene needs.
I also take issue to the fact that his tail, that's just because it's a tail, it's still Godzilla's tail. It doesn't collapse when the tip of it, and it's still a sizable tip, is leaning on one side of the Colosseum building, and the building does not collapse. But hey, you can just walk through other parts of the city and just destroy it just like that. This is the first time I've not liked a Monsterverse movie. This is the first time.
And it's a shame because I think we both went in wanting to enjoy it.
What did you think of the villains, or at least Skar King and Shimo?
I didn't think really much of them, to be honest. I guess it was good to have if you're going to go with this, then it's good to have a natural enemy as opposed to, say, like Mechagodzilla, where it's a man-made one. And it's, I suppose they wanted to have a adversary for Kong and an adversary for Godzilla. So they were fine. I did like the fact that your one Shimo, like, as soon as the thing was broken, like, it was very much no, I'm only doing this because I'm being tortured to. So there was no reason for it to fight anymore, and it's able to now be in that kind of cast of characters going forward. If we do get more of these, that maybe that's another ally they have. I mean, I don't see them. What threat could be bigger than the Skar King, another monkey? Like, it was nothing. It was another giant monkey for them to fight. I didn't think much of it else.
I like the idea of it. I like the idea of the fear that this Skar King was going to induce. Because, oh look, it's another monkey, but this one's red, and this one has got arms that are longer than, it's an orangutan looking titan. And I thought, okay, giving Kong a real run for his money. Nah, not that much. He's got a spinal whip, a whip made of skeleton. That's cool, I suppose. They tried to give him a bit of character because he's trying to inspect Kong, and he's not really engaging much eye contact. It's as if, I don't know if he's blind or something, but remember that scene where he's interacting with him? He doesn't really look at him. He has his head tossed to the side as if he's in a trance or something. I see everything, blah blah blah. I like the idea of it, but it didn't amount to anything. I did like Shimo, only because I like the cool design, and it's nice to have an adversary for Godzilla, and I like that not all new Titans are bad. And I also think Ghidorah is the most menacing Titan monsters have
in
ever
any
faced.
of these, yeah.
I thought, shouldn't have saved Ghidorah for Godzilla and Kong to fight together, but oh well. I want to talk about Dan Stevens for a second.
Okay, yeah. I thought we could get away with not talking about any of the human characters. But yeah, no, go ahead. Talk about Ace Ventura.
There's definitely something wrong with him. There is no way in hell any one sane person is going to be so chill and go with the flow with the environment that's going on. And even... Yeah, well, I don't even know how to describe it, and I just want to be conscious for time. But yeah, there's definitely something not right with him. Someone gets eaten by a tree, and it's like, yeah, don't let fear persevere, let love embrace it. And at least Brian Tyree Henry, who I actually really do like as an actor. I'll never forget when I first saw him, and I like that he was the one who was commenting on all the things that we, I suppose, should comment, because this is not a natural thing in our reality. And I thought, okay, this is the type of movie that we're getting when Rebecca Hall just casually asks anyone standing next to her, hey, you want to come to a ride with me for the crack?
Yeah.
The Hollow Earth. Just asks Dan Stevens because he's in the room. Just because her daughter says pretty please, she brings him down. And just because she feels bad for Brian Tyree Henry, says, hey, I did you a favor, you owe me. Okay, bring him as well. I'm like, wow, this is so stupid. Just, yeah, sure, just bring all these casual people. Where the hell is Alexander Skarsgård? Why isn't he here? At least, like, I'm not complaining that he's not here because I like the actor. I'm complaining that you're just bringing Ace Ventura and the guy who has the podcast from the last movie down to the
Hey, don't be
world.
insulting people with podcasts, man.
I'm just saying, as far as bringing back characters into the sequel, they might have benefited from bringing Kyle Chandler or Alexander Skarsgård back, as members of the career, like philosophy monarch, whatever. You know what, David? I don't care anymore. I'm done. I wanted to go into this movie and watch big monsters fight each other, and I got that with poor CGI. So okay,
It's a movie that if you wanted to see that, like, a year from now, that you can just fast forward to the end, the final act, and just watch them fight, because you don't need anything leading up to it, really. There's nothing that I'd want to see again, other than maybe the final fights, just because if you want to see them fight each other. But yeah.
Just to be conscious for time, I think we better do the recommendations and wrap up.
Yeah, have you got a recommendation first, or do you want me to go first?
I do have a recommendation, David. I've got two, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
First one, I think people should really jump on The Bear if they haven't already. I think you recommended it before. Well, I'm going to recommend it again. But it's not just that reason alone I'm recommending it. I am recommending it because I just want to acknowledge how we are now getting musician biopics in the quantity equivalent to superhero movies these days. Because Jeremy Allen White is now going to play Bruce Springsteen, like how Rami Malek played Freddie Mercury and Taron Egerton played Elton John, and how Austin Butler played Elvis, and how Timothy Chalamet's playing Bob Dylan, and Jafar Jackson, his uncle Michael Jackson. So I just wanted to give a shout out because I do love a good Springsteen. So, and I think Ibn Masbarak is just great in The Bear as well.
He is, yeah.
And I literally only started watching The Bear after hearing his Fantastic Four casting. And you recommended it as well to me personally before you recommended it as well. So The Bear is actually a really good show. And I really thought, really, this show about cooking and in the restaurant is a great show. What? This 25-minute episode running? Yeah, it is great. But I do have another recommendation, David. It's a podcast I've started listening to now for the gust of 2 weeks, and when I have the time to, I just pick a random episode on their channel, and they cover a load of stuff such as Yesterday, Stand By Me, The Thing. I listened to all their Jurassic Park talks, and an awful lot of these movies and stuff that they review actually makes me want to go back and watch them. I don't have them all on DVD, and not all of them are streaming, so it's like, gotta save them to my letterbox so I can watch them again, because Another Happy Pod has actually become another thing to listen to in my social life. And I know you've recommended them before as well yourself, and of course they have Doctor Who podcast they have, and I just like hearing them completely bicker and disagree and just rip into each other as well. I like listening to them, and actually I'm now to the point where I'm eager to know what they're gonna chat about next week, and I'm starting to run out of things of what they're talking about. So Another Happy Pod, good dudes.
Yeah, good dudes. Nathan and Lawrence, good. I interact with them on their Doctor Who podcast at the odd time, so they're great guys. Can't recommend them enough as well. And then for my one, I'm going to recommend a movie I watched last night, and it is called No One Will Save You. It's available on Disney Plus. It is a film starring Caitlin Dever, and it's about a home invasion, and that's all you need to know about it. And I have to say that I was not expecting what the film is about. I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised throughout the movie in terms of its execution, in terms of its dialogue, in terms of its effects. I just really, really recommend it, and it's a good scary watch if you're into like home invasion stories, like Hush and Don't Breathe and stuff like that. This is one that's a little bit not in the same vein, but it's still good. I enjoyed it.
I seen it, yeah. I seen it.
Would you recommend it? Do you like it?
Would I recommend it? Yeah. I would recommend this if it is a home invasion movie, but you could put it in another category, and I won't disclose what that is. But yeah, definitely another good pick. And lack of dialogue, David, I would argue. Lack of dialogue.
I know, I didn't want to say that out loud, but lack of dialogue. It's very if you're putting on subtitles, there's not a lot of reading, so don't worry about it.
If you're an avid watcher of movies where you put on subtitles, this is one you don't need to put subtitles on for. No,
not at all.
But starring our very own Abby for The Last of Us.
Yeah. We were watching it actually last night, and Laura turns to me and she goes, "Oh, she'd be such a good Ellie. She would have been a great Ellie." And I went, "Yeah, you're right, she would have been, but she's going to be Abby, so hopefully she she's just as strong of a character." And Laura doesn't know who Abby is, and so I'm excited to see her play Abby. So yeah.
Well, this was exhilarating, wasn't it, David?
Yeah, a lovely episode. Thank you very much for joining me, Brian. Thank you very much to the listeners at home for listening.
Thank you for hosting.
Hey, man, listen, anytime, honestly. I'll do it again next week. Don't worry about it. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, make sure that you make sure that you give us 5 stars, make sure that you are subscribed to us, make sure that you are following us on all our social medias. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we are on Facebook, we are on absolutely everything, so make sure that you're following us. We're on TikTok as well. We post reels and TikToks and stuff like that, little clips from the podcast. Obviously we don't do video, so we have to edit them in. You've done a few TikToks there over the next week, kind of.
I'm enjoying the TikToks I've done recently. They're not recordings from our episodes. These are stuff we've recorded separately on our own, because I wanted to give some shout outs to some movies that are coming out that may not have exact release dates, but I still wanted to get ahead of it. So please, if you haven't followed us on TikTok, go on ahead and just see what we're putting up there. Get to know what movies that are coming out that we're excited for, or maybe you don't know are coming out yet. So go, even just give a little. It is the one we posted out today was our 3rd highest viewed TikTok now, so and I'm actually I'm delighted with that. So
yeah, just have a wee look, just take some time out of your day, do a bit of scrolling on the page. But yeah, new episode every single Wednesday, so make sure that you are back with us this time next week. Brian, any final words?
Cha.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, David.